Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Debra Pinkerton. September 11, 2001. Many Americans woke up to find the United States under attack. Hijackers flew planes into the Twin Towers in New York City and the Pentagon. A fourth plane crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people died. We will reflect on the 24th anniversary a little later in the show.
But first, we begin with what is being called a political assassination. Conservative Christian activist Charlie Kirk was gunned down during the first stop of his American comeback tour at Utah Valley University. Kirk was answering a question about mass shootings when police say a gunman fired one round from a rooftop, striking Kirk in the neck. That person is still on the run. Some 3,000 people were in attendance, and now, as we know, millions of you have viewed the shooting and the aftermath on social media, Debra, from virtually every angle.
Yeah, everywhere. I have not watched it. My son saw it accidentally and said, "Mom, do not watch it. It's horrific."
I haven't, but it's almost unavoidable because it's being presented to you every second.
Yeah, very sad. Kirk, the co-founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, died doing what made him a potent political force, rallying conservative voters on a college campus. His death is one of an escalating number of attacks on political figures, from the 2 assassination attempts on the life of President Donald Trump to the killing of a Democratic state lawmaker and her husband in Minnesota, to a fire set at Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence following a Passover celebration.
But this one feels so very different. Kirk held no political office. He had a massive following online, more than 5 million on X, 8 million on Instagram. But the tragedy is, of course, compounded this morning by the reality the horrific event has been viewed and shared tens of millions of times on our phones. The 31-year-old leaves behind a wife and 2 children. So how do we process a public event like this together as a family? Pastor Josh Robertson is a regular Morning Light panelist and a major figure in the national education reform movement. But his first love is as the pastor of the Rock Church in Pennsylvania's capital city, and that is where he joins us live from this morning. Pastor Josh, we thank you for joining us on short notice and from your church. You've preached so many funerals. Many, like Charlie Kirk, were young. They were cut down in the prime of life with seemingly so much more to say, but in a split second, the book is closed, at least here on earth. So what do you say to those who are feeling this morning total despair, even anger, that a good God would allow this kind of evil again and again and again to persist and in such a public way?
I think the first thing is, it's the reality that we are waiting for the Lord Jesus to return. And I think that as long as he delays his return, the reality is that we live in the presence of sin. Thanks be to God, because of salvation, we are free from the penalty of sin, which is eternal separation from God. We are freed from the practice of sin, which is the habits, the behaviors. We're free from the power of sin, the temptations, the habits. And that's a lifelong process of getting that right, sanctification. But we are still in the presence of sin, and we will be until the Lord Jesus returns. So a piece of it is telling the person who sees this that, this is the part of what this world will look like until the Lord comes back and eradicates all sin and areas of suffering in our lives. So I think the first thing I can do as a pastor is just help you deal with the reality, right? That these things will happen.
Well, it's encouraging, but the reality of living on earth is hard. We've seen back-to-back gruesome murders this week. You have the 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee, Rania Zarutska, and now a 31-year-old man, Charlie Kirk. One unknown, really, until her death. The other pretty famous. What is the effect of having millions of people see their deaths essentially streamed online again and again within minutes of what were essentially public executions?
Well, I think this speaks to our culture being addicted to entertainment and, sadly, trauma. So what you see is, entertaining videos that go viral and traumatic videos that go viral. But the issues that Charlie Kirk stood for, whether you believe in them or not, notice that the issues that he talked about are not what's going viral. It is those clips. It's those small moments of whether it be pleasure or entertainment or something so traumatic. I look at that video, and I've seen the video, and sadly, you can see it and then not be really impacted by it. Well, that's not the first time I've seen somebody shot. I see it all the time. It's in our entertainment. It's in our movies, right? So it's almost like if we're not careful as a society and as a human race, we'll grow a cold shoulder to something that is so tragic and traumatic. We should be horrified that a man lost his life like that. And we definitely shouldn't want to share it and make it go viral. That man has a wife, the man has children. And so I just, I'm concerned about our culture because of what we really magnify, not the issues, but the traumatic events that,
For sure.
I don't think shouldn't be like that. Yeah.
Well, you make an interesting point because those horrific assassinations of the 1960s, RFK, MLK, President Kennedy, Medgar Evers, there was a buffer zone. There wasn't that space. We didn't see all the pictures. We didn't see the Zapruder film till much later. Take the last minute and sum this up. Where's the hope? What should the Christian's message be to their neighbors today who are at a boiling point? And on one hand, a nearing total despair on the other.
Absolutely. So number one, I believe when you look at 1 Thessalonians chapter number 4, verse number 13, the Apostle Paul tells those saints, I do not want you to be ignorant concerning those who die and thereby grieve like the world does who have no hope. No, we have hope. We have the Lord Jesus Christ. We know that our hope is secure. We know that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But here is my challenge, the golden rule, right? Let's go back to what we learned in first grade in Sunday school. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If that was your wife, if that was your sister who's his wife, if that was your nieces and nephews who are his children, what would you do? What would you want the world around to do concerning them? And I feel like if we do unto others as we would want them to do unto us, we'll be absolutely fine. And I think that's the most Christ-like thing that we can do, is to come to the aid of his wife and family and village and be humans and share in this experience.
Pastor Josh, you were the right voice constantly in grief mode, it seems, as you comfort people with the hope of the gospel. You did that, I know, for many people this morning. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for being on the program this morning. It was an honor to have you. Likewise, my brother. Thank you. Well, we now turn to our Morning Light panel for a little more insight. How do we talk about the absence of hope in the midst of tragedy? And Tannon, it struck me over the last few hours as we went to bed, and I don't know how many of us couldn't put our phones down last night and immediately wanted updates in the morning. It's just kind of how the human body works. But what do you do when you're trying to listen through all of the messages, the political message, lots of political messages here, lots of narratives being created, stories that connect one event to another event, maybe skip over another event? Where is the gospel in this? If you're trying to look at the story and say, okay, where's God in this? Where is it?
Honestly, it was a very tough thing for me to find out about. And I'm not necessarily a big follower of Charlie Kirk. I'm very, very much unplugged from social media, so I'm definitely not his audience of people. However, I think I was concerned by the continued moral decay and dehumanization of people. And I think the thing that broke my heart was knowing that Charlie Kirk, a 31-year-old guy, not too much younger than myself, was now going to be subject to a news cycle. Like, we may forget him as quickly as every other event. And that broke my heart, mostly because in the efforts to paint him and put adjectives around his name, the one thing that grieved me the most is this is a brother of Christ. He just lost his life. And that's the message that wasn't being portrayed, was a Christian fell. And I think what is sad for me is that we could ever get over something like that so quickly. And even more sad that in the calls for justice or for understanding of what's going on, people were not talking about God in that moment. And that was something that he was very open about was his faith. And I think that's why I was actually encouraged. I watched one interview, and it was a baseball player at the university, and the interviewer just asked him a very simple question. So, like, what do you think about all this, and what do we do next? And he just shook his head, and I appreciated his humility and his simplicity. He just said, we need God. This is just a reminder that we need God.
Cynthia, you're going to go over the next few days and be around a lot of young people, and they have seen this video. And they will also encounter, if they go down the Charlie Kirk trail, after they get through the politics of it, this message that Tannon's talking about. I'm a sinner. I am not perfect. Don't follow me. Follow Jesus. This is a person who had a lot of followers. Do you think this is one of the sad but beautiful, in a way, gifts that comes out of this, is the ability now to translate the gospel to a generation of hurting kids?
Well, I can tell you, I walked the halls this morning before I came. So I was at the high school this morning, and I was telling Tannon, I saw more faith shirts or shirts that had a Bible verse on it or an American flag than what I would normally see. So I think that kids that have their walk in faith are walking it today, and they're walking it proudly. And so I think we as adults, when we see that, need to encourage them to continue that, because a day like today is a day where we need to encourage that.
And it's almost, Cynthia, a choice that you can take a conversation the political way,
Absolutely,
or the Jesus way. And,
Absolutely.
and many times we kind of like the political because it's much more interesting. There's sizzle to it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, before all of this happened, the question for today was, how do we bring unity?
Yeah.
And I will say one of the beautiful things online was there was some unity.
Right.
There was some, like on 9/11, we
There was
were
that immediate
Americans
reaction,
and
yeah.
we were faithful.
Need to take the last minute and help us look for God in the midst of a tragedy like this, but how this event cannot be a wasted event for people who are looking at horror today.
Yeah, when these happen and you think glory to God in all things, how does that work in these things? And it was sub-attention to me, the impact on children. All my kids are posting on social media. And I think it's the guest earlier this month or last month who was literally getting bombed at the time.
Yeah.
And you said, well, what do you do? Grab your possessions? And she said, no, we forgot about our possessions. Mm-hmm. We love our neighbors and we guard our heart. In other words, they just focus on God because it's so explicit to them in that moment that they don't have control, and the control is God's. And that's what we have to take out of these moments. And our kids in particular are so adjacent to this because of social media. And so we have to remind them that it's not about that, and it's about unity. And our kids are teed up for unity. And we need to stop, the media needs to stop pushing everybody apart and using these opportunities as a splitting issue. That's not where our kids are at. And let's use this to acknowledge their commitment to each other.
We're united in that purpose today. So thank you very, very much. This is helpful. Well, coming up on Morning Light, we look beyond the shadow of 9/11. Christina Stanton was a tour guide in New York City when America came under attack 24 years ago. She was at home just 6 blocks away when the Twin Towers were struck. Her powerful story up next. You're watching Morning Light right here on Lighthouse TV. Welcome back. Well, 9/11 changed the lives of so many people, thousands, millions of us.
Christina Stanton was 6 blocks away when the Twin Towers collapsed. I sat down with her in our Allentown studio. She shared her amazing journey. Christina, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming to our Allentown studios. Let's go back to September 11th, 2001.
So on September 11th, my husband and I were at our new home in the financial district, just 6 blocks away, 6 blocks south of the Twin Towers. And I was still in bed, but my husband was awake working on his computer when the first plane struck the North Tower. And the impact of that, with us being so close, shook our building. So he knew right away something catastrophic has happened somewhere. So he rushed out into our terrace and he saw the flames on either side of the North Tower, came and shook me awake, and I ran out with him on our terrace floor, and we were just in shock. It's like not a nightmare. I wasn't even sure if I was awake watching this crazy scene in front of me, when all of a sudden over my right-hand shoulder, the second plane came right in front of us, turned, what I call an 8 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and went into the South Tower. And that's where kind of our journey started, was watching that plane go into the South Tower and everything that came afterward. But that's how we started that morning.
There must have been just so much disbelief.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we thought that when we saw the flames coming out of the North Tower, that somebody had snuck in a bomb. Finally, somebody had done it that they tried to do in 1993. We weren't sure that we had no idea it was a plane. So when that second plane came and hit the South Tower, of course, there was no question that it was an attack. A complete disbelief, but it really kind of got worse from there with the Twin Towers falling. We were in Battery Park. We had evacuated to Battery Park when the towers fell, covering us with dust and debris. We couldn't breathe. We ended up at one point literally saying goodbye to each other. And we just thought, any worse than this, and we're not going to survive. We're not even sure we're going to survive this, because it really just felt like the world was coming to an end.
Wow. I mean, many people may not realize that. I mean, you were 6 blocks away. This really affected a huge area.
Yes.
Now your next step was to get out of the city.
Right. So we left our apartment. Of course, we ran down the 24 flights and we ran to Battery Park. You know, when you're surrounded by danger, your body is just kicking in that let's just get as far away as possible. And for us, the farthest away we could get is Battery Park, which is a 25-acre park at the tip of Manhattan. And that's when the towers came down. And when it covered us and we could barely breathe and the smoke was completely enveloping the park, we just really felt like rats in a trap. There was nowhere to go because you're surrounded by the harbor. So that's when we said goodbye to each other. And then from that point, we saw people queuing up by the coastline, and people were hitching rides on boats to make their way off of the island. And we did the same, and we got on a white New York waterway ferry that dropped us off in New Jersey. And then it was kind of like a whole other journey to get back to our home, which really didn't happen until January, as a matter of fact. So that was our own little odyssey to kind of come back to home and come back to normalcy that lasted several months.
I would say many people may not realize that you were not able to return to New York City.
Right. So it was less returning to New York City, but returning to our neighborhood. So the World Trade Center complex abuts several neighborhoods. One of them is Battery Park City, another one's Tribeca, and then there's ours, the financial district. So it affected that entire area. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that fires smoldered for 90 more days. So it was mid-December until the last fire was put out. There were plane parts that were found on the terrace next door to ours. And yes, I have learned that people don't realize that when the towers came down and all that devastation and destruction, it didn't just affect the 16 acres of the complex. It was literally a huge radius. And a few reasons why we couldn't get back home is there was talk of looting. Of course, there wasn't any electricity or amenities to go home to, grocery stores or anything like that. And then basically, when the towers came down, they registered on the Richter scale. You know, it's an earthquake. So they had to go around and test all of the buildings within a radius of the complex to see if they were even structurally sound, and they themselves weren't about to crumble. And our building was one of them. So all of that just took a long time to make sure that it was safe for us all to come back.
Sure. A lot of unrest in your life. Christina, we do need to take a break, but we do have much more we would like to talk to you about. Coming up next on Morning Light, Christina will share how 9/11 brought her back to the Bible. Learn how her faith journey changed. That's next. Stay with us. We will be right back.
Welcome back. Well, the terrorist attack in New York City changed Christina Stanton's life.
She was working as a tour guide in the city when the towers collapsed, a terrifying event that changed her faith journey. Christina, let's talk about how 9/11 really changed your faith journey.
Well, I grew up in the church. I grew up in North Florida, and I went to the largest Baptist church in town. Loved it, loved the youth program. They were all my best friends. I got baptized in that church, I think, at the age of 13. But when I went to college, I kind of left my faith behind. I was busy. I had other things. I wasn't underneath my parents who would be like, we're going to church on Sunday. So if I didn't have them telling me, and my friends, of course, had scattered, then I wasn't going. And that continued when I moved up to New York City. And I moved to New York when I was 23 years old. And I thought, at that point, I was thinking, my parents had a faith system that they had followed. I want to forge my own path. I want to follow where my heart leads and not just inherit something from my parents. But what that really meant was I didn't go anywhere.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to explore, which I think is wonderful, but and to find out exactly what you believe, for sure. But what it was really kind of giving me an excuse to not do anything. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of figured I'll figure that out later. I've got plenty of time. I'm young. Yeah, I make this happen. I'm here to make things happen for my career, and it's all about me. So maybe good intentions to research my faith, but what that led me to is having no faith. So when 9/11 happened, I was a newlywed, and I married a Catholic, and we had gone to church every once in a while, but really we approached our marriage with not asking the hard questions again of what we're going to follow or what church we're going to go to. But 9/11 absolutely pushed the envelope there, because when we had said goodbye to each other on that day, I remember my husband picked up my hands and he started praying the Lord's Prayer as like a good Catholic boy would do, right? He was just, kind of going through some motions. What do you do when you have the checklist of possibly you're going to die? What are you supposed to do next to get yourself prepared? You're spiritually prepared for death. And all I could think of was, what do you do when you've left your faith and you're in that situation? It was such a lonely, sad feeling, and I missed my childhood faith, especially when push comes to shove and you needed it. And I didn't have a resource for it. It wasn't accessible to me. I didn't know what to do.
Well, this prompted you to do something.
It did.
Tell us about that.
I realized that I didn't have all the time in the world, that life is short, that we're not always in control. I mean, of course, if I was in control, 9/11 would have never happened. If I was truly the master of my own destiny, then none of this would have happened. So it forced all those questions on me at age, I believe I was 31 at the time. So what happened was I had a friend who went to church. She was active in church, and she said, a lot of people have given money to our church to help victims like you, to help survivors like you. I want you to go to my church and ask for money. It's essentially what she said. And I was like, no, I don't go to your church. I'm not going to ask some random church for resources. And I said, I'm not even a victim. Nothing's happened to me. Almost 3,000 people died that day. I am not eligible for this money. And she was like, you are. You're homeless. Your dog's dying. You both are out of work as a result. You have legitimate needs that the church can fulfill. So I thought about her words, and I went to the church, and I said, I went with a chip on my shoulder, thinking, what are they going to ask me? I'm not going to, talk to strangers about my experience. Mm-hmm. But they were so wonderful and dignified, and they paid for our vet expense to keep our dog alive. And that really, it didn't obligate us to go to that church by any means, but it gave me a connection, and we started going to church as a result.
And what were the next steps? You became very much involved, and so did your husband.
Right off the bat, because I remember we went to a service in October, and Timothy Keller, it was Redeemer Presbyterian Church that Timothy Keller and his wife Kathy started in 1989, and he had a sermon that really spoke to me. And actually, I've been able to go back and listen to the actual sermon that I listened to when I went to that first service. And of course, Brian and I were already suffering from PTSD. The whole city was in an uproar, so upset. And he had this quote that I'd love to say, because I remember it then. He said during the service, "We don't know the reason that God allows evil and suffering to continue, but we know what the reason isn't. We know what the reason can't be. It can't be that he doesn't love us, and it can't be that he doesn't care. And why? Because he got involved with his son. Christianity alone tells us that God lost his son in an unjust attack." And those were some words, along with the rest of his sermon, that just really spoke to me where I was at. And we did become very involved afterwards. We became members within a year. My husband started working there within a year, and he is now their longest serving employee. He's been there 23 years. And so it really fundamentally changed our lives. Not only did we fall into a relationship with Christ, but we joined his community, and in every way we are totally immersed in our church and involved. But the roots go back all the way to 9/11. And 9/11 isn't our story, though. It's how God revealed himself to us in the aftermath. That's our story.
Yeah, that is wonderful. A tragedy, but so much good that came out of it. Christina, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.
When these events happen in our lives, the last 24 hours, 9/11, it takes all of our earthly security away, and then you are left with this question of what do you do with God? And she answers it so beautifully, and he's waiting.
Right, absolutely. Such an inspiring story,
Sure is.
and so very happy for her. Well, Christina has written a book about the September 11th attacks. It's called Out of the Shadow of 9/11. You can learn more about this book by visiting ChristinaRayStanton.com. All proceeds from the book go to the faith-based nonprofit Loving All Nations.
Stay with us. We'll be back right after the break. The stunning events of the past day on the eve of another dark milestone in American history have a generation of young Americans asking some hard questions, maybe the hardest they'll ever confront. It's a smart, fast generation living all their important events online, from first dates to engagements to promotions to life's letdowns.
And on Wednesday, a life destroyed, and millions viewed and shared it online. Not because they love violence, but because they're looking for answers. Why did this happen? Who could do this? The death of Charlie Kirk, husband, father of two, influencer to millions, holds the answer for every generation's quest of hope. Time and again, Charlie did not focus on himself, but pointed to the one person worth following.
Here's what Charlie said. Jesus saved my life. I'm a sinner. Giving my life to Christ is the most important decision I ever made. So to a generation demanding the answer to evil, it's right there. On this day of sadness, we're looking to the same hope Charlie claimed, not as a political activist or a social media influencer, but a simple follower of Jesus.
We want to thank you for joining us for this special edition of Morning Light.
And on a day like today, check on your neighbors, love and forgive your enemies, because you and I've been forgiven. And God willing, we look for you back here tomorrow morning.